I'm Andrew Kraft. We're at the top of a new hour. Thanks so much for being with us. Thank you to my colleague, Andy Mack, for guiding you through the last couple of hours on yet another busy day, this busy Wednesday. Speaking of senators, take a look at this. I want to put up this post there. Burgess Everett, he covers Capitol Hill. A Schumer aide has said that Senator Schumer has confirmed there will be an all-senators classified briefing on Iran early next week. And I don't have to tell you, you know this. In a week's time, so much can change, and the world can change, or breaking news happens, and we evolve with it. And so it looks like senators will have an all-classified briefing on next steps on Iran next week, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we're going to focus our efforts right now. Let's move from Capitol Hill, gorgeous LiveNOW look there in Washington after the nation's capital got quite the downpour. It looks like the sun's coming up. Let's focus our efforts, though, on the Middle East. We have live pictures there, still yet again, in Tel Aviv and also in Jerusalem. And the question now is, what will President Trump do? What will he decide about whether or not the United States will strike targets inside Iran to help Israel's efforts there? Fox News correspondent Rebecca Castor has more on that very question. Let's listen.
More airstrikes overnight and into this morning as Israel continues its mission to wipe out Iran's nuclear program.
Israel is doing what the entire world said they would do. They would stop Iran from having this weapon.
But to finish the job, the Israelis might need help from the United States. One of Iran's key nuclear facilities is buried deep inside a mountain, and Israel doesn't have the firepower needed to destroy it. But the U.S. could use its B-2s and bunker buster bombs to take it out.
You don't know. I may do it. I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do.
President Trump has two words for Iran: unconditional surrender.
That means I've had it.
But Iran's supreme leader says that's not going to happen and warns the U.S. entering into this war is 100% to its own detriment. The damage it will suffer will be far greater than any harm that Iran may encounter. On Capitol Hill, Defense Secretary Pete Ricketts would not comment on any potential U.S. action.
My question for you is whether you have been asked actively to provide options for the president regarding a strike in the Middle East.
If I had or I had not, I wouldn't disclose that in this forum, Senator.
The U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem is now working on evacuation flights and cruise ship departures for Americans who need help leaving Israel. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Rebecca, thanks so much. In the meantime, we did get an update on social media from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on day 6 of Operation Rising Lion. Let's listen.
אזרחי ישראל היקרים, אנחנו ביום השישי של מבצע עם כלבי. אנחנו יצאנו למבצע הזה כדי להסיר שני איומים קיומיים על מדינת ישראל. איום הגרעין ואיום הטילים הבליסטיים. אנחנו מתקדמים צעד אחר צעד בהסרת האיומים הללו. אנחנו שולטים בשמי טהרן, אנחנו מכים בעוצמה אדירה במשטר האייתולות, אנחנו פוגעים בגרעין, בטילים, במפקדות, בסמלי השלטון, ואני חייב להגיד לכם שאני מדבר עם מנהיגי העולם. יש התפעלות אדירה מהנחישות שלנו, מההישגים של כוחותינו, ויש גם התפעלות אדירה מכם, אזרחי ישראל. מהרוח האיתנה שלכם, מכוח העמידה שלכם. ואני רוצה להגיד, אנחנו סופגים הרבה אבדות כואבות. אבל אנחנו רואים שהעורף איתן, העם איתן, ומדינת ישראל חזקה מתמיד. הנחיתי את משרדי הממשלה להגיש סיוע לכל מי שנפגע. בד בבד נמשכת הלחימה העצימה ברצועת עזה. אנחנו מחויבים להמשיך ולהשיג את שתי המשימות, הכרעת החמאס והחזרת כל חטופינו, החיים והחללים כאחד. אנחנו לא מרפים מזה. לצערי, גם בימים האחרונים נפלו לנו לוחמים גיבורים. אני משתתף בצער המשפחות. אנחנו שולחים תנחומים בשם הממשלה והעם כולו, מחבקים אותם. אנחנו נמשיך עד שנביא את כולם ועד שהחמאס יוכרע סופית. אני מבקש להודות לנשיא טראמפ, ידיד גדול מאוד של מדינת ישראל. אני מודה לו על ההתייצבות לצידנו, אני מודה לו על התמיכה שארצות הברית מסייעת לנו בהגנה על שמי ישראל. אנחנו משוחחים ברציפות, כולל ששוחחנו אמש, שיחה מאוד חמה, ואני מבקש להודות לנשיא טראמפ על הגיבוי. אזרחי ישראל, יחד נילחם, בעזרת השם, יחד ננצח.
Okay, so there you have it. That was a message from the Israeli leader, Benjamin Netanyahu, just today, highlighting the phone call he had with President Trump just yesterday. And we know President Trump grappling with this question on whether or not to use U.S. assets to strike inside Iran, particularly and specifically on this nuclear site known as the Fordow site. In the meantime, let's talk about all of this with national security analyst and expert and retired Marine intelligence officer Hal Kempfer. He joins me. Hal, good to see you here. You and I have not spoken since Thursday, before the initial attack, before Israel launched the preemptive strikes, and boy, has a lot happened since, so it's good to see you. Our viewers know you. You're a familiar face to them, and your insight is invaluable. So I want to start with this. Let's go into this piece, this scoop by our friends and colleagues there at the Wall Street Journal, including reporter Lara Seligman and Alex Ward. They report this, Hal. President Trump told senior aides late Tuesday that he approved of attack plans for Iran, but was holding off on giving the final order to see if Tehran would abandon its nuclear program. That's according to 3 people familiar with the deliberations. So he met with the National Security Council today, yet again, a second time in a row in the Situation Room. That was this afternoon. What is the president grappling with? Because it seems like, according to the Wall Street Journal, he has made up his mind about this. He just needs to give the okay and to say when. He's still waiting for Iran to come crawling back to the table. The Ayatollah today didn't seem like that was going to happen here. So help us make sense of the president's thinking right now. According to the Wall Street Journal, he's made up his mind, but he's still giving Iran the off-ramp. Why?
Well, Andrew, I would say historically that's what presidents have done, particularly in the Middle East. And I have literally been on the ground in the Middle East while this is all going on. There's always the option of them coming up with some sort of diplomatic solution. In this case, you know, if the Ayatollah was to come back, and if Iran was to come back, say, okay, we're going to open up all of our sites to the IAEA, we're going to dismantle all of our nuclear capability, anything that we can do for enrichment. Although at this point, there might be some requirements on what they do with ballistic missiles as well. You know, that's an off-ramp. And certainly you have to back that up with force. There's now, you know, 2 carrier task forces that are sitting, you know, near Iran, Gulf of Aden area, if you will, in that general area around there. But you also have another carrier task force coming into the Eastern Mediterranean, which provides a tremendous amount of firepower. Reports of about 30 aerial refuelers that were flown over there to support our aircraft or potentially support Israeli aircraft in terms of long-term strikes. And then there's B-2 bombers and maybe B-52 bombers in Diego Garcia. All of this is a way of saying it is being backed up with force. So the option is on the table of doing that, using that unique capability we have with those MOP, massive ordnance penetrator bombs. They could actually go in there with B-2 bombers and do that deep penetration bombing of those underground facilities in that mountain. All of this is on the table, but all of this is being played out with the off-ramp of a very serious negotiation. And as you can see, certainly with Khamenei and his regime, they have to really understand the sort of Damocles is hanging right over their heads before they'll move. And that's not untypical of other situations we've had in the Middle East. And, you know, I've been involved with a couple of wars out there. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it rolls out. So still looking at our live picture there over the skies of Tel Aviv tonight, Trump said this, Hal. He says, I may do it, I may not do it. He also said the Iranians proposed to come for talks to the White House. That would be quite something. And I want to put this up. This is from Lucas Tomlinson, according to the IDF. 60 fighter jets completed a series of strikes in Tehran in recent hours. 20 nuclear weapons development sites and missile production sites were targeted. That was from about 40 minutes ago. So I have to ask you this, Hal, back out live to Tel Aviv. How cowed is Iran right now? How diminished are they? Because the comments from the Ayatollah today indicate there's some fight left in them. Now, would that change if the U.S. were to get involved? I mean, the Ayatollah rejected U.S. calls for surrender
in the face of these strikes. Trump wants an unconditional surrender. He has tweeted that and posted about that multiple times. So the Ayatollah isn't budging. Why? What more does he have up his sleeve, if at all?
You know, he has a lot of ballistic missiles up his sleeves. Now, about half of the, at least as far as I know, about half of the launchers have been destroyed.
Okay.
Actually, probably more than half. So there's serious attrition on that. Now, when you get down to the southern part of Iran, furthest away from Israel, there's inventories of ballistic missiles and launchers down there that is tougher for Israel to basically strike because it's so far away. It's just a longer mission. It requires aero refueling. It requires a lot of things. So that's tough. That's one, of course, that would be wide open to carrier groups doing carrier air strikes. If the U.S. was to enter it, they could actually go in there and cause serious attrition. One thing you have to understand, though, is, and I should say everybody has to understand, is that you can't put a whole lot into some of the rhetoric that comes out of Tehran. Like I said, my history going back to the Middle East goes back 35 years, if you will. You know, I've seen this sort of thing where, you know, if you remember Baghdad Bob, he was sitting there talking about, you know, the Americans are going to be destroyed and stuff, literally as our tanks are driving outside the where he's holding the news conference. You know, so some of the rhetoric can be a little embellished, shall we say, you know, very confrontational, but the reality on the ground is they can't do anything. That's some of the mindset, some of the psychology that they're having to deal with is they have to make it very clear there's just nowhere to go. And I think that's what we're doing.
I was going to ask, there's this term in foreign policy and diplomacy known as strategic ambiguity, and the I may do it, I may not do it seems to, you know, fit that to a T here. It seems like the president is trying to, you know, yes, get Iran to concede wholly, or at least bring them back to the table here. But he's trying to keep them on their toes. That's just kind of my assessment. I think you would agree with that. I only ask about what's going on in Iran right now. It was confirmed today that they confirmed this, that the satellite transmission of one of the state media companies, the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting Group, was temporarily hacked. While it was hacked, a message reportedly played encouraging Iranians to pour out into the streets. Also, we heard that there was some type of major cyber attack on the Iranian central bank that for some time froze all assets in the bank there. So you're seeing some real sticking points within the regime itself kind of trickling down to the Iranian rank and file. Is that going to give way to anything, do you think?
Well, what it is it's a psychological operation, and it's also dealing with economic and social cohesion. It's basically removing a number of pillars in society that the regime counts upon to try and create this idea that they're somehow able to do this. One of the things is you take away the finances, all right? If you can, and the problem is, you know, with those types of attacks where you hack a media outlet, that there's quick corrective action that they can put in place to stop that. But you pick your time and place where you want to use those kind of tools. And the other thing, which is probably a bigger psychological element, is that Israel has air superiority over all of Iran, but actually, with the exception of very low-lying, if there's a, you know, except flights close to the ground where they could potentially come under direct fire of automatic weapons or something like that, really, Israel is kind of achieving almost air supremacy. And which means they can fly freely in the day or night, anywhere over that. That has a cumulative psychological effect when your government can't protect your skies, when they can't protect you from strikes. That is something that Israel is counting on.
So, Hal, I want to ask you about a bunker buster bomb. What is it? Why doesn't Israel have any? Because from what I've read, that is what we would be providing to take out the Fordow site. We have them. Israel doesn't. Why not? And what is it?
Well, it's a bomb that was developed some years back. It's called a massive ordnance penetrator bomb. It's about a 30,000-pound bomb. It was specifically designed with places like Fordow in mind, if you will. It's to go after those deep underground facilities where they produce things that we want to get hold of, usually weapons of mass destruction. And with that, nuclear is very high on the list of things. These are these deeply protected sites that you just can't hit with anything else. Now, what it does is when it hits, it will basically if you want to use the expression, it's delayed fuse. It'll burrow into the ground deeply, and then it puts out, as you can imagine, 30,000 pounds, a massive explosive force, which basically causes the internal cavities to collapse upon themselves. It's not that the bomb necessarily will penetrate the bunker, but it causes such tremendous kinetic energy that the entire facility will basically collapse upon itself. That's what it's designed to do. The reason why is because the delivery system. It's a B-2 bomber.
Okay.
You have to have a big bomber. And frankly, when it comes to big bombers, that's a very small group in the world, and the U.S. is basically top of that small group. So we have this unique bomb, this unique delivery system, and that's just why Israel can't do it. The only thing they could do would be to put commandos on the ground, and that's a very risky mission.
I see. Axios has some new reporting on this very subject here. They report this, that Trump has been pressing aides about the certainty of whether dropping bunker busters will actually destroy Iran's most heavily fortified nuclear facility. They report these doubts are one reason Trump was still questioning whether to move forward with the strike. You mentioned that they penetrate the ground. How far into the ground? How deep does it go?
Well, it depends on how the fuse is set.
Okay.
I will tell you the exact characteristics of it, I think, are classified, but it goes pretty deep. Now, they have assessed that it could hit that facility, but that's actually the right question. President Trump is asking the right question. There has been some doubt, would it be enough? How many would have to be delivered? It could really destroy that. And of course, they're also probably looking very carefully at the intelligence. I don't know how much we know about those deep underground cavities, the bunkers themselves. That's really where you're kind of, that's where you're taking some operational risk. I mean, of course, nobody wants to go there and drop the bombs, and then the facility wasn't completely destroyed.
So Barak Ravid and Mark Caputo there at Axios also report this. That Pentagon officials told Trump that they were confident it would work, that they were confident the Fordow nuclear facility would be greatly impacted by the use of such ordinance here. I want to talk about this lastly, because I was getting this question from some viewers. There's all this nuclear material at these sites. So presumably, if Israel is taking out so many of these sites or damaging them, you would kind of logically conclude that there's a lot of radiation in the air. Is this particularly harmful to the Iranians? And I only ask this because you're hearing so much that Trump, even today, claimed Iran was a few weeks away from developing a nuclear bomb, a nuclear warhead. What does that even mean? How do we parse that? You heard it also from Netanyahu. That's the entire predicate of why they announced and went forward with Operation Rising Lion. How close was Iran? Will we ever know?
Well, let me take it in two parts.
Okay.
Number one, if you hit a facility with radioactive material, potentially you could create the effects of a dirty bomb, if you will, where you spread radioactive material out. Now, one of the things about Fordow and Natanz, some of these others, is the facilities themselves, a lot of that stuff is underground. So if you hit it, a lot of it would be contained underground, so you wouldn't have that above ground spread of that material, theoretically speaking. There's a lot of dynamics and a lot of peculiar situations of each site you have to look at. But yes, you could have some radioactive spread. That's also part of the trade-off. You take out a facility like that, you also recognize that there will, you're going to have some problem, and it may be a place that you just can't go to for a very, very long time afterwards because of radioactivity. Now, the second part is, it's been assessed for a long time that Iran was very close to creating a nuclear weapon. I heard before this thing started, they said that Iran was capable of probably producing about 15 nuclear weapons within a few weeks. That's what they were saying before the Operation Rising Lion actually began. More recently, they've been saying they can create 9. I'm assuming that they've lost some capability in doing that. That's one of the reasons that they're looking at this, is because the concern, the thinking is that with these airstrikes, with everything that's going on, that the reluctance of the regime in Iran to actually go forward and create a nuclear weapon will drop, and they'll give the order to do so. And that's why there's an imperative to basically kinetically, physically stop that from happening. And that's where you start talking about taking out Fordow, the tent, some of these nuclear sites, but also some other things to include the delivery systems or potential delivery systems of these weapons. That's why there's such urgency on this. That's why you see the pressure on the president. That's one of the things that President Trump has to weigh right now.
Okay.
You know, the political cost of doing this versus, you know, the calamity. Just keep in mind, Israel's a small country. It's only about the size of New Jersey. One nuclear warhead, one Hiroshima-style warhead, and it would be probably bigger than Hiroshima, could have catastrophic effects on Israel. That's what they're looking at.
All right, Hal Kempfer, as always, we're going to let you go. We'll definitely be speaking again. Thanks so much, Hal, for your time.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.